Yeah.
About 6-7 seconds.
We're now live.
I must die, you must live, to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings, make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dead, left in a blaze, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself. Sees the kite, my kite he made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope, let it be a tale.
So, shall we start? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's event, Countering Discrimination and Intimidation in Peace and Disarmament, Supporting Advocates for Palestine. I am Tamara Inomoto, Associate Professor at Meiji Gakuin University, Japan, and I will be hosting this event. Let me first cover some basic issues. This event is live streamed on YouTube, but if we get disconnected from the live feed to YouTube for any reason, the event will be recorded and shared shortly after on the same YouTube channel. So please access to this YouTube channel if this event gets disconnected somehow. And let me introduce today's theme and our speakers. As many of you may be aware, NGO campaigns working in the peace and disarmament are prologued by Western-centric and racist structures. And this seminar examines such structures and practices in light of the events at the Stop Killer Robots campaign. And we will first have Mr. Ousman Noor, whose employment at Stop Killer Robots was terminated following his personal tweet calling for an end to occupation, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing in Palestine. And we were actually going to have Miss Sadia Dar, who was UK campaign to Stop Killer Robots coalition coordinator until December last year, until she resigned because of the silence and inaction of the UK and global Stop Killer Robots campaigns on Palestine. But very unfortunately, we are missing her today, so we are sincerely hoping her recovery. Then we will have Mr. Vahid Razavi and Mr. Fred Luban, both of whom have been fighting hard inside the Stop Killer Robots campaign on Osman's case, on Palestine, and on structural issues of the campaign. Then we will have Mr. Giovanni Fassina of the European Legal Support Center, the first and only independent organization defending and empowering the Palestine solidarity movement in Europe through legal means. And considering Ms. Sadia's absence, I myself will also make a presentation to avoid the panel from being all male. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And please first welcome Mr. Ousman Noor.
Hello, thank you so much, Tamara, and thank you all for listening to us at this crucial time. We're in one of the most tragic and historical periods of history, where the genocide that we've all been witnessing over the last few months seems to be escalating. An estimated 50,000 pregnant women have no space to give birth in Gaza at the moment. There's no sanitation or clean water. There's no way to bathe. Hospitals have been bombed and shelled. And the last remaining hospitals, if they are functioning, are on collapse. Over the last few months, hundreds of doctors, nurses, and medical personnel have been killed by the Israeli forces. 30,000 people have been killed, approximately half of them children. We've been looking at footage of entire rows of dead infants spread out over a hospital floor like toys. We've seen footage of Israeli soldiers dressed up as doctors and nurses, carrying under their garments assault rifles to assassinate patients. We've heard from Israeli ministers, including the Prime Minister, that the intention is to destroy Gaza, to annihilate the civilian population, and to ethnically cleanse its people. We've heard for calls to kill the children and the animals as well in Palestine. Last month, many of us will have watched the International Court of Justice deliver a verdict in the case of South Africa versus Israel, where Israel has been charged with genocide. Genocide is the crime of all crimes, where a state is deliberately exterminating a group only because of who they are, because of their identity, an entire group, and preventing them from giving birth. We know that that's what's going on because it was declared before it even began. One of the orders of the International Court of Justice was to stop committing genocide and to ensure humanitarian aid was going to be provided to the starving, sick, elderly, paralyzed, traumatized population. That was a specific order of the International Court of Justice. And one of the very first responses of a great deal of Western states was to cut off funding to the one UN institution that is actually delivering and capable of delivering basic humanitarian aid and assistance, to suffocate that entire system. We now know that there is famine going on across the whole region. We have heard stories of children eating grass to survive, of seeing footage of kids drinking water from the ground, which is stagnant and in the mud, to survive. And the response of a great deal of the international community was to cut off funding to the one institution that was actually capable of saving them. And so I want to begin this event with another reminder to all colleagues, friends, family, that we must do everything in our power to stop this genocide. Genocide is a crime against humanity. It is for all of us to be concerned, and we must do what we can. I want to speak a little bit about my own termination at the Stop Killer Robots campaign. I have commented on this on social media, and I've benefited greatly from the support and solidarity of people on this call, others in the campaign, and within the wider social media landscape. I've been privileged to have support. That support has manifested in an open letter concerning my termination, which I'm very grateful for those who signed. By way of background, I come from the UK. My origin is Kashmir. But I grew up in the UK at a time when the UK went to war in various countries. We went to war in Iraq. 1 million or more people were killed there on lies. We know that lies were told in Parliament about why the country had to go to war in Iraq. We've seen this country bomb Libya, bomb Syria, bomb Afghanistan. And I grew up during this time and decided that the best thing that I could do to try to achieve justice for what had happened was to study law. And I became a barrister, and I worked as a refugee lawyer, where I represented people from 80 different countries who were fleeing persecution for a wide range of different reasons: political reasons, religious reasons, sexuality, gender. The point is that they were being persecuted and they were seeking sanctuary. And so many of them came to the UK, where they were refused asylum, and then they would instruct me and I would represent them in court. And I found solace in the rule of law, because we had a legal system that said, if this person is being persecuted, then they have to have asylum. Certain conditions are met. And I was proud to be a barrister, and I was proud to be able to use the law to give some relief to people who had a great deal of misfortune, of being tortured, of being raped. The law was there at least to protect such people. And I did that for 9 years in London. And I joined, when I moved to Geneva, the Stop Killer Robots campaign. Stop Killer Robots campaign is a coalition of 250 civil society organizations and is led by some of the world's leading humanitarian, human rights and disarmament, peace organizations. These include Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the Women's International League of Peace and Freedom, CELAC in Latin America, PAX, Article 36 in England. And I was attracted to this job, not just because it was interesting in terms of the particular issue of killer robots, which is a crucial issue, which I've spent the last 3 years advocating on, but also because of the vision and values of what the campaign represented. It was a broad coalition, but united by vision and values, which are published on the campaign's website, that speak to all of us and give us motivation, give us a sense of purpose about why these things are important. Why do we need to stop killer robots? And that's quite nicely encapsulated in the vision and values of Stop Killer Robots. It states we respect each other's inherent dignity. We work together as activists to build a better society and overcome systems of inequality and oppression, in pursuing non-violent solutions to problems and using cooperation, negotiation, and activism to build the social response that are needed, not merely convenient. To promote law as a social process created by people for people and requiring social engagement in order to ensure it works to assist the vulnerable, not already powerful. I just quoted from the Stop Killer Robots vision and values. And this is what my job was to do. I was the government relations manager based in Geneva, and I regularly met diplomats to talk about these exact issues. The reason I was able to speak confidently and passionately about the need for a new treaty on autonomous weapon systems was because we believe in each other's dignity, because we believe in non-violent solutions to problems, because we're trying to build a better society, because we protect and respect the basic principles of international law, which is what we are arguing for in this campaign. This is what gave us fuel and belief in the value of what we're doing. And so what happened in the Stop Killer Robots campaign is I was sent to New York to be at the General Assembly, where a resolution was being tabled on autonomous weapon systems, which I had been working on and spearheading for several months. I'd conducted about 60 bilateral meetings with diplomats on this resolution, a very important resolution, which we all in the campaign were behind, 250 organizations, and we proudly spoke about that fact. But meanwhile, the violence had begun in Israel and Gaza. And Benjamin Netanyahu had declared that he was going to turn Gaza into a wasteland. And they had just cut off the water, the electricity, the gas, the food, and started bombing indiscriminately Gaza. We were in the room, in the Chamber of International Security and Disarmament, when the Israeli ambassador, we were sitting in the room when the Israeli ambassador described the people of Gaza as barbarians and savages. We just sat there and watched that happen. We sat there and watched as the very people that we were working with on these important issues were beating the drum of war and defending Israel and giving them carte blanche to destroy Gaza. These were the people that we were working with, who we considered colleagues. At this time, I decided it was fundamental to raise this as an issue with the steering committee in Stop Killer Robots. And I reached out to members of the steering committee saying, we are looking at a situation where a genocide could begin. Already ethnic cleansing has begun. Already collective punishment has begun. Already using starvation as a means of war has begun. This is in the context of a long and historic besieged population living under military occupation, and there has been genocidal calls. This is of significance to us, especially when the people that we're working with are calling for that to happen. Is no one here seeing the the dissonance in our work? I certainly was. And so I reached out to steering committee members privately and was told to be quiet. My request was to engage our coalition, the very coalition that we are built upon, whose values we share. I requested to reach out to members of the coalition on this issue, just to engage on the issue. That was denied and ignored. And so I made a personal message on my Twitter and sent a personal message to contacts already on my WhatsApp saying, we need to end the violence. We need to end the occupation and the apartheid. The story of what happened is all enclosed on the grounds of appeal for which I wrote my challenge, and it's online. I won't go into great detail. But I was terminated by Stop Killer Robots because of that tweet, because I shared that tweet. And not only was I terminated, it was done so without a disciplinary hearing, after me beseeching the steering committee to show compassion, after me beseeching the steering committee to have an intersectional approach. I was dismissed without a disciplinary hearing. The communication sent to me references my tweet on Israel and Gaza, references the fact that I sent it to diplomats as the basis for the termination. And I was terminated immediately without given access to my account. That was terminated. I was deleted from the website of the campaign, and an immediate email was sent out straight afterwards saying Ousman has left. A misleading email saying I had left when in fact I had been terminated. The actions of the steering committee since then have been nothing short of gaslighting, silencing, and intimidation. I have been called aggressive for raising a request for documents to be disclosed. I have been, no one from the steering committee, save one person, reached out to me to offer any kind of support or solidarity about what that felt like. And instead, implicit suggestions have been made that I was sacked for some other managerial reason when none has been given. In fact, the very termination specifically says I did my work with commitment, dedication, and skill. I have endeavored for the last 4 months to promote transparency in the campaign, and this has been rejected. And in fact, I would say the contrary has been done, where misleading statements have been made instead. I have also seen now, through talking to people like Giovanni and many others, that this is widespread, this is rife. But the reason it is so shocking in our particular culture is because we are the very people who are supposed to be calling out these war crimes. It is in our job description. We are supposed to be the professional activists who are intended to call things out when this is happening, to say to our colleagues, you should not be complicit in war crimes. But it is this community, unfortunately, led by the leading human rights and humanitarian organizations, who separately have said things, but in this particular situation have actually been engaged in a process of gaslighting, silencing, and intimidation for speaking out on the Palestine issue. How is it that UN special rapporteurs, each with their own mandate on women's rights, for example, on educational rights, on housing rights, each with a duty of impartiality, have all come together and said we must end the genocide? And yet us, who is civil society, who says we speak out in these times, and I'm talking about Stop Killer Robots here, has not done that when this genocide is taking place. It still hasn't done that. I think it's emblematic, unfortunately, of a deep rot that is now prevailing throughout, I would say, humanitarian disarmament of white supremacy. How is it possible that we are not speaking out at this point? And I have been paying regard to the comments being made by other members of the campaign and the disproportionate, strongly disproportionate amount of solidarity, support, kindness, and recognition from Global South and those identifying with the Global South versus in the European part of our coalition. I cannot escape that fact. There is an issue of white supremacy, which, Tamara, you identified at the beginning, and this is what this has to be about, which needs to be looked at and it needs to be addressed, and that is necessary before healing can begin. I've been speaking for quite a lot of time here. I'm going to stop. I apologize to the other speakers for going over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ousman. You've been so brave in sharing your story. Tamara, Dr. Tamara, I really appreciate the fact that you're hosting this event. I have been a member of the Coalition to Stop Killer Robots for the past 5 years. At first, they approached us at Ethics in Tech, and we hosted a number of events. We got grants from them to put up videos and share the cause, and we really believed in stopping killer robots. Before I tell you more, I want to thank you as an audience for standing on the right side of humanity by participating in today's event and watching it and potentially sharing it with people. I also want to acknowledge all the people that make money by watching us in various Secret Service and NSAs and intelligence agencies. I hope they find a more respectable job in the future and a respectable line of work. As you know, I, and alongside a number of campaign staff members and coalition members, produced a letter that said, as Gaza burns, injustice against one is injustice against all. This letter was put out a couple of months ago, got over 2,000 signatures. It was sent to the steering committee and the coalition members. And unfortunately, as of today, we have no response from them. We all support Ousman and his employment case. I didn't know Ousman from Adam except for the work that he had done on behalf of the campaign. And I really appreciated that work. When I heard his dismissal, I reached out to him and wanted to know more, and that's how we have taken on his cause as a wrongful termination. I have shared multiple times on the coalition mailing list my concerns about a lack of condemnation by the campaign and the steering committee in regards to what's going on in Gaza. All I have heard has been a deafening silence. 2 days ago, a member of the steering committee, on asking about who's appointed them in a new leadership role, and who voted and had visibility, attacked me and said that we're all unpaid. We're doing this as a volunteer work. So you're asking too many questions. Another steering committee member threw the rule book at me and said, we have a code of conduct. And here's the code of conduct for the steering committee. Maybe I'm not the best guy when it comes to following rules, but I believe in mission and values of the campaign. As a third member of the steering committee responded to me personally back in December and said I shouldn't be raising issues within the coalition mailing list, I made it very clear that I will be taking my grievances to a public forum. And I've been doing that over the holidays, over Christmas, and I will continue to do that either with or without the campaign. The campaign steering committee is not acting in line with the campaign's vision and statements that Ousman has highlighted. That's a clear fact. If we dare to call them on it, they throw the rule book at us and the code of conduct. The campaign steering committee is accused of blatant discrimination, retaliation, and racism. Member organizations have demanded that the entire steering committee to resign. When I was producing content on behalf of the campaign, not a single one of the speakers that they recommended was of a minority, race, or ethnicity. Diversity and inclusion is only for coalition members. It's with these members that the steering committee and staff get their legitimacy. Yet the steering committee does volunteer work and is not paid. Well, I was also not paid for producing content on behalf of the campaign. The money was received at Ethics in Tech, a 501c3, and was used to pay artists and cover venue costs and video production costs. I provided full transparency, unlike the campaign, for every penny that I received, where we received the money from, and where we spent it. I want to highlight a couple of things. Richard Moyer, that dismissed Ousman, he has been recently removed from the head of the steering committee. He's from Article 36, another nonprofit. He's on the UK Ministry of Defence's AI Ethics and Advisory Panel. I hate to say this. You see, people like the Richard use the coalition and its members' credibility to get on a Ministry of Defense advisory panel, give talks at the UN, and if we question them, and we're shown the code of conduct. Simply put, the Ministry of Defense of the UK has been systematically bombing the Middle East, as Ousman has mentioned, from Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, you name it. And now they're working on ethical way to bomb people with the help of Richard Moyer. So if the steering committee fails to condemn the following weapons as a group or in their own personal platform, they should please step down and let others lead. What's the point of a leader that will not leverage the brand of the organization and their own personal clout that they gained as a result of leadership position, and they fail to lead? When humanitarian organizations fail to lead, the world bleeds. We're not in this for theoretical purposes. We're activists, we're humanitarians, we demand action. Here are the weapon systems that should be immediately condemned by the steering committee and coalition members. And I'm talking every single one of the steering committee members and the coalition members, both personally and as a statement. I have asked for this, it has not happened, and I simply don't understand why. If this is a campaign focused on putting the stop to these kinds of weapons, autonomous weapon systems, then do your job. Don't hide behind the fact that I don't get paid, so don't expect much from us. Be sure to thank big tech companies such as Google, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, their founders and executives in enabling the apartheid and genocide, and not to mention my own US government and the Western tax dollars that continue to fund it. So let me talk about some of these weapon systems, because after all, this is about killer robots and autonomous weapons. Hasbro is the AI-based targeting system that is used in targeting journalists and civilian populations by Israel. Project Nimbus uses Google and AWS Cloud for machine learning, AI using facial recognition and object tracking and targeting. Red Wolf, mass facial recognition training all over the occupied territories for maintaining apartheid control of Palestinians. Blue Wolf, used for smartphone to capture facial details of Palestinian users. So I smile on my phone. A smart shooter used for AI and atomic shooting of Palestinians all over the territories for crowd disbursement. And finally, a name called Gospel that is used to target over 200 journalists that are now dead and injured alongside their family members in Gaza. You see, it's not just Palestinians that have died in Gaza. So has the racist, white, colonialist human rights organizations and their lack of action. It's a sad day for humanity, truly a sad day for the campaign to stop killer robots when they do not condemn these weapons, when they do not speak against these weapons. Finally, I want to emphasize that calling out a genocide in Gaza by the steering committee, while we have witnessed the atrocities, is not going out on limb for them to condemn it. To condemn autonomous weapon systems that everybody has documented, that has killed these journalists, that have killed innocent civilians, that has killed aid workers, that continues to target aid trucks, is not going out on limb for steering committee members. Their entire families have been wiped out in Gaza. While we all heard the South Africa's case at the ICJ, we all heard the sound of crying videos of babies, mothers, deprived fathers of food and water and shelter and basic medical care. We all saw the devastation of these weapon systems have caused. They should condemn it now, not a moment later. Do your job, or let us elect someone to run the campaign that can and is willing to do it with the campaign's brand equity and their own personal brand equity. Don't hide behind the fact that we're not going to speak up and we're going to fire the people that are going to speak up, like Ousman. You know, as Mr. Desmond Tutu, Reverend Desmond Tutu said, if you're neutral in situation of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. So far, with its neutrality, the steering committee has chosen the side of the oppressor. 2,000 members of the public have signed this letter, have confirmed it. So take a side, steering committee. Speak up. Members of the steering committee get paid not at the committee level of campaign to stop killer robots, but they get paid by the American, German, Canadian, UK governments that fund their other activities and other organizations. and they serve for free on the steering committee, leveraging the legitimacy of the coalition to get backing. Simply, you cannot have two masters steering committee. Either go back to your own organizations and get paid to take the side of inhumanity by them, or condemn these weapons. You will not have your cake and eat it too. We will not allow it, throwing the rule book at us and the code of conduct while you openly disregard the mission and values of the Stop Killer Robots campaign will not be tolerated. Members of the steering committee, either stand up for good or kindly step down for good. Thank you. Tamara,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, thank you. Can you see it? Can you see this? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Fahid. I am actually not a member of the Stop Killer Robots campaign, so I wasn't going to make a presentation, but as our sister, Miss Sadia Dar, informed us that she couldn't make it today, so we are missing her and wishing her recovery. And I have prepared a presentation today. And in a sense, this may indicate how so much more difficult for women of color to speak up in this sector, in this Western-centered, white-centered, and male-centered sector. We women of color tend to face double discriminations. We just have to expect and worry about much more backlash when we try to speak up in a sector. And we are often looked down and belittled, not just by white people, but also by fellow men of color in the sector. So it is indeed difficult for me too to speak up, but I will try and do my best to do so today to prevent this panel from being all male. So let me introduce my work first. I'm a scholar and I have been publishing articles and books, including this book titled The Arms Trade Treaty, The Self-Sovereignty and Arms Transfer Control. And basically, the book critically analyzes the Western-centric ideas and assumptions underpinning arms transfer control discourses and practices from the 19th century to the present. And in the end, the book challenges those who argue that the current humanitarian control of arms transfers, such as the Arms Trade Treaty, is simply emancipatory. I took a similar approach when I published this edited book, Weapon Taboos. The book critically analyzes the often Western-centric ideas and assumptions that justify the stigmatization of certain weapons from the 19th century to the present. And the book tries to address the specific historical contingency from which certain terms and framings of weapons, often Western-centric, such as inhuman weapons, WMD, and so on, were produced, used, forgotten, or reinterpreted. So it again challenges those who argue that the prohibition of particular categories of weapons is simply emancipatory. But after the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020, I asked myself if I was a little bit too polite when pointing out Western-centric nature of arms control discourses, measures, and practices. And I wondered if I should have used the term racism much more explicitly. Well, I guess most of us know that our humanitarian disarmament sector, especially its decision-making circle, has been predominantly white, like those who are in the photo of the About Us page of the Stop Killer Robots campaign back in 2018. This may show how the core members of the campaign understood, or perhaps still understand, who the campaign was at that time in 2018, or still is right now. And I guess many in our sector noticed too that when NGOs and academics, either of color or from the global south, pointed out issues of discrimination, misuse of power, and a lack of accountability in another humanitarian disarmament campaign about 5 years ago, not in the SKR, but in another humanitarian disarmament campaign, we were labeled as violent, impolite, undiplomatic troublemakers. But I didn't explicitly use the term racism in analyzing the recent humanitarian disarmament. And perhaps I was afraid of making those in power too uncomfortable, or perhaps, or maybe because it would have made it too difficult for me to cope with the daily reality. I mean, I worked for Oxfam for 12 years, an international NGO for 12 years. And our Tokyo office in Japan was set up in 2003. And I happened to be there as an intern. I became in charge of arms control and other humanitarian issues in general, became a staff, and ended up working there for 12 years. And in our Tokyo office, I was just ordered to sing a song of Oxfam and humanitarian disarmament campaigns, including the control arms. I was actually made to use a different name, Midori Natsuki, not Tamara Enomoto, Midori Natsuki, for my Oxfam work for the entire 12 years. I started my PhD study when I started to work at Oxfam, and those Oxfam people feared that the Japanese public and the media might mix up my academic works and Oxfam's works, and that it might cause great risks to Oxfam. So for 12 years, I wasn't even myself, and my true self was completely excluded from Oxfam and the control arms from the beginning. But at the same time, switching names actually enabled me to be an insider and outsider at the same time, a very good thing for a researcher. And imagining myself as a different person, Midori Natsuki, actually helped me to emotionally detach myself from the toxic condition by telling myself, this is not happening to me. This is happening to a person called Midori Natsuki, not to me, not to me. I mean, unlike Osman, I was basically alone and no one was with me. So this became one of the ways to cope with the daily harsh reality for 12 years. But still, I wasn't ready to analyze the humanitarian disarmament sector from an explicitly race angle in my academic works. But since the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020, I have seriously rethought my approach and have been holding many open online events such as this one with my dearest and most fearless sister called Minalakshmi Nepram. And I'm not part of the Stop Killer Robot campaign. I'm not a member of it. But when I heard of Ousman's case, I instantly felt what Ousman was being made to go through. So we organized this seminar with another fearless friend last month to talk about Ousman's case and the racist and Western-centric structures of humanitarian disarmament campaigns. And the seminar also examined the discourse and the practices of the humanitarian disarmament campaigns that may have contributed to, rather than prevented, the wars and horrors currently taking place in Russia, Ukraine, and Palestine, Israel. And my article, The Limits of Humanitarian Disarmament, Why It Failed to Prevent the Ongoing Horrors, was just published in Japanese 2 days ago on a very famous political journal sold and read nationwide here. And the article first refers to Ousman's case. So holding and hosting this event was actually a natural course of my action. And I'm very honored to be with you all. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you. Fred?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Tamara-san, for hosting this space, not just for tackling Usman's case, but it's good to also have a space for voices. Either we are at various levels, particularly addressing many members of the Stop Killer Robots campaign, who's still trying to find their voice. Some voices are probably louder than others, but some voices are also intentionally silenced. But we do respect those who are still finding their voice or can't really um, uh, make a sound because of many circumstances that we fully understand. My sharing tonight is quite a short few minutes only, given our limitation. I'll just basically be sharing some of my insights. One is that Usman's case is not really a unique case. It happens in many global networks, international NGOs, for people who are critical, who questions systems, not about people, but really asking difficult questions of accountability and transparency. Um, this particular case could have been simply addressed um, uh, easily by people who are actually in the humanitarian field, people who call for um, mediation, facilitation of dialogues, um, consultative in nature, respectful in many ways, because we are all trained in conflict resolution or conflict transformation. This could have been handled easily. However, there are a lot of factors that have played in it. And as part of Nonviolence International Southeast Asia, one of the very active member of the Stop Killer Robots campaign. We just convened with the Philippine government the last big Asia Pacific meeting in Manila as our contribution to the global campaign of addressing autonomous weapon systems. And when we heard Usman's dismissal, we also questioned the way it was done, the way that it was handled. We asked questions, and we assess based on those answers, but we're not receiving any. So we called on the coordinator of the Stop Killer Robots campaign to resign. That call, it was a day after the announcement that Usman allegedly left the campaign. So we called on the coordinator to resign, basically as a natural move. Probably you've heard so many cases in Asia where when you're involved in a scandal or in any controversial case, usually the leadership resign, not because they are guilty. You resign because you allow an independent inquiry to happen. You step aside because you respect the entire organization and the people who have built that campaign, and you preserve that sanctity, because starting a campaign is already quite courageous. We fully understand that global campaigns, and I've been involved in a lot of global humanitarian disarmament campaign. It just starts with a few organizations, few people who come up with really, really good ideas, starting off with a campaign. And when we fully respect those efforts, to preserve the campaign when you're going through some controversy or some of these issues, leadership should step aside and allow an inquiry for it to surface the truth. But in a very, I would refer to it as a remnant of a very colonial system, something also happens at the back. There's a intention to hide the truth. There's an intention to be business as usual, as if it's not a big issue. But we all know that the first victim of this kind of effort is always the truth. And that was what we were trying to call out to everyone, not just the leadership of the campaign, to really make the leadership accountable. We do not believe that it was just a person who has the power to dismiss, to fire, to terminate Ousman. We believe that the decision was supported by the steering committee members, and so we fully call the steering committee members for accountability and transparency, and that was in October. And there was no effort to respond to our call until just last month in January, after the new year. There were efforts, but it was not addressing much of the concerns we've raised. In series, we asked questions from during the Manila meeting. A group of campaigners made several attempts to engage the leadership, and these issues remain to be not responded in a way that should have been in a more towards the direction of accountability and transparency in the governance system of the campaign. In the recent statement we did, while the leadership of the Stop Killer Robots campaign announced that the coordinator resigned, we have not seen addressing still the issue of accountability and transparency. We further our call to all the Stop Killer Robots campaign steering committee members to resign. Again, for the purpose of saving the campaign. The trust issues are still there. The steering committee members have lost its moral ascendancy to govern. Again, it's not about disrespecting the members of the steering committee members, but it's really saving the campaign and hopefully be able to move forward in ways that are decolonial. And this would be my last point. In the humanitarian disarmament campaign, I don't see it that humanitarianism is the only element that should be added to be able to achieve what we nobly wanted to achieve, which is the reduction or the ending of human suffering caused by these horrific weapon systems. There is a need to decolonize our ways of working. It is now the time that when we talk about a decolonized humanitarian disarmament field, it's changing our mindsets, that we stop taking advantage of the weakness of others. I would repeat that. We really have to stop taking advantage of the weakness of others, a very colonial way. And this is an example. The Ousman case highlights this particular aspect. the way we hire people, how we give jobs, how we use funds, grants, the donor system itself is a reflection of a very colonial system that takes advantage that we from the global south, or preferably you use the term global majority. Most of us are from conflict areas who have suffered much from weapon systems, should really be the one um, being heard. Our views should guide the directions of campaigns, problems, our own problems, because so much of the weapons are used in our societies, in our communities. We have the lived experiences of addressing it, of looking at it from a perspective that when we do global campaigning, we won't take advantage of the weakness of others. We don't dangle funds because I am poor. You don't get us to be part of your steering committee because you just want diversity. You just want the color in it. But actually, our voices are not heard. We have spoken a lot during these issues, but no one have really listened to what we really want, what we really aspire for. Uh, so with that kind of and I could really build on a lot of this. This is by the way, my PhD dissertation, and I'm looking forward to share more about this. Of what does a decolonized humanitarian disarmament field looks like? And I'm just really sharing some a bit of it. But again, my point is decolonization, or having a decolonial framework of doing humanitarian disarmament field, is needed at this time for us to be able to really achieve of ending human suffering. Thank you. I
Giovanni.
pass on to Joel.
Okay, thank you so much. No, thank you so much, Fred, for this. It was very touching and extremely relevant, I would say. I just want to add a few things. I mean, I fully agree with what he said. What happened to Usman is not an isolated case. It happened many, many times. What Usman has been experiencing is anti-Palestinian racism. And we saw an escalation of anti-Palestinian racism after the 7th of October, but the time of institutionalized discrimination that stereotypize and basically defame supporters for Palestinian rights as inherently anti-Semitic or terrorist has been there for a long, long time before 7th of October. So at the European Legal Support Center, we have been working on hundreds of cases of anti-Palestinian racism. And I would like to end with a positive note by saying that like what Usman is doing and the campaign we're carrying out, it's it's really important step. And most of the time we're dealing with this case, we are successful because when people are silenced and censored, the goal is to scare them, but most importantly, the goal is to isolate them. They want to isolate people from their colleagues, from their peers, from their community, and create fear, create a sense of chilling effect. So reclaiming the space and reclaiming your agency and speaking out about this type of discrimination and take any means, also legal, of course, to make the perpetrators of this form of discrimination accountable, it's crucial. It's extremely, extremely important. I really would like to encourage people, if they check on our website on the defend page, they can see dozens of cases where people were fired or dismissed or smeared, and they pushed back and they succeeded. So I won't gonna take too long time, but again, I just want to say that this is the only way if we really wanna address the systematic root causes of this form of discrimination, which is pushing back. And pushing back entails organizing, campaigning, entails legal tools, but most importantly, this requires the willingness to speak out. That's what Ousman did very bravely this time. So I really want to end by saying that if other people experience form of anti-Palestinian racism, form of discrimination, to reach out to us. If these incidents happen in Europe, because we operate mainly in Europe, but most importantly, to reach out to your network, to don't be isolated, and to push back, because pushing back is absolutely possible, and winning is extremely like it occurs most of the times. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Giovanni, for your statement. And thank you so much, everyone, for your presentations. And finally, as a chair, let me make just one question because we don't have much time. And one question. What kind of ideas, practices, and perhaps organizations of disarmament can we develop in the future by addressing this racist system, by decolonizing our sector? Well, in other words, what is the way forward for you? This is my question. I hope some of you can answer. Ousman?
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you again for your solidarity. And as Giovanni said, I've been very blessed to have the support and visibility on my particular case, but it's been alarming to me throughout this period to learn how deep this problem has been for a long time. And I hope that we can use this opportunity to progress, because the point here is not to be revengeful. I believe very strongly in the people in this campaign, and I believe in our ability to transform. So I take that as my ambition. The way that I see it, Tamara, is what we've noticed is that it's not good enough just to simply put it on a vision and value statement anymore. You can't just say we are decolonized and we believe in justice and we believe in tackling oppression, because the Stop Killer Robots campaign had that, but didn't do it. And I think at this time, and it may be something that I continue to evolve in thinking, I look forward to reading Fred's PhD if that becomes available, because genuinely would be fascinated in terms of the types of structures that we need to have to make sure we're not just paying lip service, but actually doing these things. But at the moment, my inclination is that it's a people's movement. I think power is rarely ever given over without someone asking for it and saying what you're doing is wrong and this needs to change. So I think speaking out and talking about these issues, and from the leadership side, I would say it's so important to listen and to treat the leadership position as primarily a listening position, to be willing to hear criticism and not take criticism personally, because we are individuals and we can evolve, but the structures can be something that we're criticizing, and it's not an individual that we're criticizing. So detaching oneself, as you were saying, Tamara, I found that so fascinating how you were able to detach yourself. I think getting some distance as well from the structure, being able to say, okay, I was seeing things in this way, now I'm seeing it in a different way. I hope that we use this as an opportunity to reflect in those terms, and for it to be a constant endeavor. I don't think this will stop. Right now, Palestine is having a genocide. Other countries are suffering massively too, people who are represented in our campaign. We've got suffering in Sudan, we've got suffering in Congo, we've got suffering in Eritrea and Afghanistan. And I hope that as a campaign, if we are to have those vision and values, that we do something about them. We need to have a space for these discussions to happen so that we know how to respond communally. Thanks.
Ousman, to follow up on that, I want to share with you guys my experience. For a number of years, for 20 plus years, I've worked in the tech sector. I used to work for Amazon Web Services. Once I witnessed the inhumanity of the organization, Jeff Bezos and Andy Jassy's of the world at AWS, I left the company. I wrote a book called Ethics in Tech and Lack Thereof. And I set up a nonprofit called Ethics in Tech 501c3 here in the US. We ran that for a number of years, even before it was a nonprofit. We organized events starting back in 2013. When the war in Ukraine broke out and we saw the military being deployed again and weapons of war that are being used by Russia and the US and everybody else in Ukraine, we decided to shut down Ethics in Tech. You can see the diversity that we had in our advisors, in our board members from various religions, ministers, tech community, comedians, artists that we brought together of different colors, national origins, and I was really proud of that. Once we shut that down, I put my ethics now, my focus on no ethics in big tech. No ethics in big tech is focused on highlighting the lack of humanity in the tech community. As I mentioned on this call, I have named out the specific weapon systems, Project Nimbuses of the world, and others that are used by Amazon and Microsoft and Google and big tech and the defense contractors that are used to target innocent civilians and journalists and cause mass inhumanity all around, suffering all around the world. So I'm going to continue with no ethics in big tech. I don't know if I'm going to set up a nonprofit or not. I don't see the need. I hope people consider attending our events in the future. Every year we have a event for NSA comedy to make fun of the National Security Agency and the fact that they get a chance to spy on all of us. And we'll continue with those kinds of events in the new year. And we also do Human Rights Day, Hiroshima Day, and that activity is going to continue on. So I support you guys in your endeavors, in the work that you do, and hopefully we can build on this event and have further discussions in our community.
Fred?
And just to add on to a more, I think more of the broader side of it, I believe to be able to transform humanitarian disarmament, I think the answering the more difficult questions really should be asked, and this is where about power dynamics is quite rooted. As long as power is defined by what kind of weapon a state have, it will never, we will, I think, won't have an end to this struggle. Even if it's artificial intelligence, weaponization, or future weapon systems, as long as global power is defined by that, and that translates to influential states who are permanent member of the Security Council, biggest donors of humanitarian aid, who are also arms producers, we won't see the light of the day of a successful humanitarian disarmament. So there should be a shift, because this kind of power is actually being reflected just even in our own civil society formations. And that's why headquarters of many international NGOs are still based in and perceived to be powerful in Europe, in North America. The headquarters of disarmament discussions are Geneva, New York. Secretariats of global campaigns are still based in these areas, in these regions. And that's because the power is power dynamics is at play. European supports European NGOs, European donors supports their own, American and North American supports their own as well. So us who are from the global South, has to find our own ways of supporting. We continue our work. Our calls are more progressive, but are now watered down. There's a lot of communities we are engaged that hates weapon. No to weapon, no more to arms. Why just control the weapons? So many communities have said we don't like anything has to do with weapon systems. But why is the global community just trying to regulate these weapons? And so there's a difference on our aspirations. And I think the decolonizing, and I'm going to back to that, is should really be central to this work, not just about humanitarianism, but really having a new decolonial ways of working. Thank you.
Giovanni, do you have any comments?
No, thank you. I have
Okay,
nothing to add.
thank you. So thank you, everyone. But it's about time now. I wouldn't wrap up at this stage because there are so many issues we may need to discuss further. And I do hope we will have the chance to do so in coming weeks, months, and years. So thank you so much again for joining us today. It was such a privilege for me to work with our speakers. And thank you, our endorser organizations, friends, and viewers for supporting us or joining us today. So yeah, this event is now adjourned. Have a good day or have a good night.
Thank you so much, Tamara.
Thank
you all
you.
speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You can leave the meeting.